all right, why am I starting this space? Because I'm doing some R&D, looking at another group that is doing something similar to a company that I am working with. And I am seeing such huge red flags. Now, initially, reading the stuff was pretty exciting, and then I was like, well, there's notes of this. It's pretty blatant and clear that they are patterned on exclusivity, occult, and more things of that way, which are interesting considering it's tied to promising wealth and other things. Now, as I'm going through this, first off, there's some glaring things. Extremely, excruciatingly long copy. There is one part of copy that is 64 pages long. 64 pages. I do not advise ever having copy that long, but if someone is going through all of it, it means that they find it riveting and enjoyable. I do not have the stomach to do that. I do not have the patience for that. And recently dealing with someone who has narcissistic tendencies and is not going to ever get out of narcissistic tendencies, I noticed that that person also loves to do really lengthy responses that absolutely says nothing, that doesn't answer the questions that I have. It's just really long, confusing, bringing in other subjects that have nothing to do with the subject matter at hand, and stark avoidance of answering any questions. So bringing in that recent experience with this excruciatingly long copy, yeah, there's red flags. Normal people don't typically do that. They kind of cut to the chase. But benefit of the doubt, hey, this is a whole manifestation thing. Of course, you want to be extremely detailed. So the initial buy-in, sales-wise, the yes. This is the warm-up to having you go through their funnel, and their funnel is a series of buy-ins, of course. Once again, this is patterned off of a lot of esoteric groups, so a little bit of Scientology worked in there on the levels, and not only Scientology, but also Masonry, Freemasonry, things of that nature. Back to the initial buy-in, it is a very affordable cost, so of course, yeah, whatever, it's not taking much from my bottom line. This is a business expense. I can write it off. Whatevs. And then initially, they were saying that, after this, we need to test you out. We need to see if you're a good fit. We need to, check this scope out if, you mesh with us and we mesh with you. And then we'll invite you to be more of a formal member. So after I bit off the first piece, no sweat off my back, low fee, they are turning around and immediately upselling me into being an actual member. And that is red flag number one. There is a discrepancy between what is stated within the letter and what is actually presented once you bite. So red flag number one. Red flag number two, I am going through the website, looking at how they're structuring things, figuring out their strategies on sales copy. Like what is actually selling people on this? What are they offering? What are they promising? Which isn't a promise at all. They have a disclaimer at the bottom of everything. And then I was like, okay, well, they have a faculty session. Who's a part of this? And, I go through the people and I'm like, yeah, no, well, these are, yeah, it's not a little specific type of people. And then I come across a quote unquote faculty member that is not a living person. As a matter of fact, I think he passed away before this organization started. So the red flags we have now are really lengthy copy where they can sneak in a lot of stuff. Second red flag is discrepancies between what they've offered in the letter or how things will process from the letter and how things actually work. And then they're throwing dead people in there on their faculty. Not through a medium. No, just putting the dead person on there. Okay. So, of course, proceed to look up the organization, get a well-rounded view of things out there. I decided to look up the main person of the organization. Oh, he's been to jail for fraud. At this point, not looking so good. Not looking so good. But let's soldier on, because honestly, I'm in here for research and development, and I want to see how it is that they are, what it is that they're selling, how it is that they're doing this, how they're getting people to sign on board. And, there's the demographics thing, but it's just very interesting how they work the system, how it's designed, and the angle that they're going. So this kind of loops around to scams, and how do you suss out scams? How do you figure this stuff out? How do you be able to really find out what's too good to be true and what's not? I mean, granted, this is all a learning experience. It's a business expense. There might be some fun people I meet. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I'll try it out. I'll dip my toes in for a little bit just to see the mechanisms at work. But
discernment is such an interesting one, because it's almost like it's not reachable. There is analyzing a situation based on previous experience, and so when you look at it, it just doesn't feel right, and so there's that gut feeling aspect of it. And also, like, there's an understanding when you walk into certain spaces, especially, if you know what normal feels like, and you walk into a space, you can immediately feel that this is not normal. How this person is talking, how this person is approaching me it's like deviating from the norm. And so I need to actually take a pause and investigate further. For example, if all of your life, people just are nice to you, but, they're not overly nice, but they're nice and respectful. And then suddenly you come across someone and they're overly respectful and overly nice and overly accommodating. That can make you pause for a minute and think about what's going on here. Is this for real? I don't think that it is always a conscious thing. I think it is subconscious. And the longer you live and you experience a lot of people, the more likely you will be able to discern when something deviates from that. I tend to be very skeptical of people who are too smooth and overly confident. I do not immediately, put them in the wrong rank. I tend to slow things down a lot when I come across people who are too smooth, because I realize, okay, this is way out of the norm and I have to investigate it, slow things down, try to understand what's going on. But it's not just that. It's not just the smoothness. It's like the numbers are not aligning perfectly and you're like, this feels off. And again, it goes back to having a good baseline for what normal is for you. If someone contacts me and says, hey, Spewer, I've got this awesome opportunity where you can make a lot of money, in 6 months, we expect that you will have this amount of returns, then I'm very skeptical. I slow things down. In fact, I would just plainly block that person, because from my experience and my understanding, people tend not to share awesome ways of making money with strangers. So that would be discernment based on experience. Now, things get a bit different when you were a low-level manager and you suddenly, move to the executive level. Your discernment will be off there because you don't have a lot of experience at that level. And so you are likely going to get deceived because you don't really know how things work at that level. But with time and through trial and error, you will get better discerning, who's a good person, who's terrible. And so I think discernment has a lot to do with experience as well. I think that's where I'll leave it. Yeah.
this reminds me of a quote that the quietest man in the room is the deadliest. And I think that's a variant off of a Bruce Lee quote. But Yeah, it's very interesting how when people diverge in behaviors, it can be very off-putting. And this kind of reminds me of the time where I was able to hang out with a former special ops person, and his candor, his way of being was just as still as the most glassy water. It had that feeling to it. And very rare to see someone that is that confident and competent in knowing themselves, in that knowledge of, like, at any moment he can take anybody's life, and it's just a very fascinating energy or behavior set to be around. Yes, and in reflection of this organization, there's also this onus on exclusivity, and yet the bar is set low for entry. And then on top of that, there's others that do the fast talking, like quick pace thing, and you got to do this now because it's limited. And, all of those in combination together really kind of manipulate a person to be pushed into these things. So that brings up another thing to consider, which is this statement on how with age comes wisdom. And I think that really takes precedence, because the culmination of our wisdom through our lifetime and being able to read the minutia and behaviors that we know have hurt us in the past is basically what's highlighting that gut feeling. Because when it comes down to it, it is those subtle, like, amping up or emphasis on certain behaviors that just kind of like really key into that feeling of this is off. Sipaway, you definitely touched on this earlier, and I've been reflecting on it. When it comes to discernment, there can be an effect to the reasoning of one person's trash is another person's treasure. So when it comes to this organization, although I am being highly critical of it and might not get much out of it besides what I'm anticipating to get out of it, another person might actually have exponential growth in their life. They might actually find those missing nuggets of wisdom that propels them forward into the space that they've always wanted to create their lives. So this leads me to believe that discernment is very and can be very unique to the individual.